Okay, we made some progress on this engine. I think the last video I had, the flywheel cover was still on. Since then, I've kind of been picking at it in 20-30 minute fits after work and stuff. And I haven't videoed much of it. I've got the voltage regulator part figured out while the electrical tape was there. This connection's missing. I got one of those I can find. Biggest, probably the oiliest mess of the whole machine was right here on the oil filter adapter. I got that kind of cleaned up. I can't take the adapter off because the flywheel's sitting right here and there's just not enough room in between there. And I don't think, no, you have to take that bolt all the way out from what I remember. I'll have to look at one of my spare adapters. We got a lot. I just took a vacuum and cleaned up a lot of the top of the engine. Pretty happy with all of that. I may go ahead and spray it off. Biggest thing I did, and I'm sorry I didn't do this on videos, I actually cleaned the carburetor. I cleaned it in place. How you do that is you take out the four screws that hold it in, and then from there you can take out the jets over here on this side. The main jet is behind this cover right here. So you take this, the throttle cable support or holder off. Then you take a 3/4 inch wrench and you can pop that plug out. And then I just took a really, I don't know, a screwdriver I bought at an auction, probably in a buck slot for like $5. And I've just shaved down I did this a couple years ago, shaved this down to where it fits in that hole right there. Because the jet is a slotted, it's a slotted jet. And you can get it out that way. If you try to use a small screwdriver that has, a small enough screwdriver to where the flares don't touch the side, you'll have a strong possibility of stripping that jet out. Meanwhile, if you take and sacrifice a screwdriver and shave down the sides a little bit to where it gets in there, you stand a lot better chance of getting that jet out. Typically, they're not that hard to get out. And then there's another jet in the top of the carburetor that you pull out. I just cleaned those with some carb cleaner, some spray carb cleaner. I didn't soak them or anything. And then I went ahead and cleaned down in there. You can see that's considerably cleaner than it was. So, I mean, overall, not necessarily a deep clean of the carburetor, but it was running okay. So I didn't think it needed that much of a deep clean. Like I said, got all this vacuumed up over here. And so now what I think I'm ready to do, I've ordered some parts, but I think I'm going to go ahead and replace the oil pan. Now, you get a couple different ways you could replace the oil pan. I obviously have an oil pan. I'm actually just going to use this one right here, get it cleaned up some, and it's a good oil pan that I've had sitting around. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull this one off. I'm not going to take the muffler off. I was originally going to adjust the valves. And ultimately, I mean, this engine was running fine. I mean, compression's fine. So we're just not going to, I don't think it represents much. I don't think we need to open it up, either in the valves or the heads to decarbon it or anything. I'm going to replace the spark plugs. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust the air gap on the clutch, replace the oil pan, and then I think I'm going to put it back together and we're going to drop it in the 1991 318. And probably what I'll do is I'll swap the hour meters over, since to me hour meters on the engine is more important. But as I've said before, hour meters are not all indicative of what's going on. So yeah, that's where we're at. And the reason I'm opting not to do the valve covers and the head gaskets to decarbonate or anything is ultimately this engine has 115 plus compression on each side. So there's not really an issue there. It has plenty of power. And since those are the constraints, or those are the positives, I think spending the probably, after you get the gaskets mailed and everything, $50-$60 to adjust the valves and clean the heads when it might not necessarily need to be done. And obviously when I pull the spark plugs, I'll look in there and see what's in there and if anything needs to be done, but I don't think it does. So let me get set up to take the oil pan off. I believe they're 4 9/16 inch bolts. I need to find my spare oil pan gasket. We could use RTV if you wanted to, but an oil pan gasket to me is just so much better. So let me get this other oil pan cleaned up. Let me find my oil pan gasket, and then we'll drop that oil pan off. We'll check it, take a look at the internals, and we'll go from there. All right, got everything set up. Take this oil pan off. Hopefully it goes pretty easy. If this was a B series engine, you would have to take the starter off, but it's not a B. With a P series, the starter is attached underneath the cylinder. Wow, that's disappointing. Let me get a ratchet. I have never had one of these oil pan bolts not come loose. They weren't that tight, so I don't know what was going on there. Alright, time to see what kind of surprise awaits us. Actually, I gotta do one more thing. I forgot to take the support for the oil dipstick off. Alright, so the dipstick's out. Like I said previously, a B series engine has a pressed in dipstick, and so you would not want to do what I just did with a B series engine. Now let's see if we can get this off. There we go. Hey, not even that much oil. Alright, well, no. Actually, there's not even that much sludge in the bottom of this pan, which is kind of impressive. Yeah, actually very impressive. Certainly gives me a good bit of hope for the internals. Let me get this cleaned up a little bit and we'll come back and look at it. So I ended up taking off the starter, mostly because the way the starter was sitting, it was sitting way too close to this edge right here, and I couldn't get in there to take off the gasket. Typical oil pan gasket, it didn't want to come off, so I had to get a razor blade and scrape it off. Had something to do with the PTO pigtail there. What I've done is I've got the engine almost at top dead center. It's not quite. I've tried to find a way. I even went to the house and got a flashlight, a couple other things, and it's really hard to see, at least on video, the let's see if I can wedge this in here. I don't know if you can see in there or not, but it seems like the cylinder bores are pretty good still. I don't know if I'm gonna get the camera out now. Seems like the cylinder bores are pretty good. No, at least no cause for concern to me with this engine. At least I don't think so. And what I've also done is I should note that, remember that oil I spilled on this flywheel when I opened up the oil pan? I have gone ahead and cleaned all that up. I've gone around the whole outside of the flywheel, wiped all the oil with some brake clean, got all the residue off. And I've also got the vacuum cleaner out. I'm going to do a little bit more, but I've got in there and vacuumed out around the stator and everything, because there was no oil leak, but it was nice and dry. And so you can vacuum it up with the vacuum, and just got the shop vacuum kind of stuck in there. All that in there was clogged with debris. So got all that clean. So now what I need to do is I need to put the oil pan back on. See if we can find my gasket. So here's my gasket. Gonna put the gasket on, and then put the oil pan on, and then we should be good to go. Trying to think of anything else that I'm missing. Can't think of it off the top of my head. So and then we should be able to start putting this engine back together and get it back in the 91, so the 91 can be a running driving machine, and then we can finish taking apart the 1990s so we can fix the other two. So let me get busy putting this back together. I'm gonna have to look up the torque specs on the oil pan bolts. I want to say it's 12 or 13 foot-pounds. Not very much because this is aluminum block, so you don't want to put too much force on them, but I got to make sure what the spec is. So off we go. Okay, getting everything ready to put back on here. And first thing we're going to do is put the starter back on, which I just realized I'm going to need an extension. I don't have that. So now that I have the extension, starter bolts are 25 foot-pounds, or approximately 300 pounds per inch. You just divide that by 12 and you get approximately 25, which is actually pretty hard to do on an engine that is turning. There's one. There's two. So both of those are in. Now the oil pan bolts themselves, those are, I believe, 239 inch-pounds, which is like 19.91 foot-pounds. So we're going to torque them to 20 foot-pounds. Just round up. So let me get the gasket set up, and we'll run from there. So key thing with these gaskets, make sure you get them oriented correctly, or make sure you get the oil pan oriented correctly. I don't think it would work any other way, but some replacement oil pans do not orient correctly, or at least they make it a little bit more difficult. But I'll show you here in just a second what you want to look for. Let me get this up here and in. So key thing with these oil pans for orientation is the front feet are the ones that are not the claw type feet. They're the full wraparound. That way the bolt can go in them, and you can put the bolt to the nut. The back feet, make sure you can see that. The back feet down here, those are the ones that are threaded. And so you want to make sure that the back feet are back there. Like I said, I don't think it would work because this oil drain would run into the starter. But there is a distinct possibility that, you know, depending on the replacement oil pan, that drain plug could be in a different place or different location. This thing is to say it does not want to cooperate with me. In the past, I've had to put all 4 bolts in. I was hoping not to this time because it makes it a little bit more of a challenge, but I think that's what we're going to have to do. is actually figures. So we're going to take this. Hopefully you can see all this. There's two. Now I gotta get the bolts in the drop. Goes back to what I've said many times. If anybody says they can do this flawlessly, they haven't done enough. Alright, now we have all of the bolts through there. We can work on putting this up here. Boy, this is not going well for me today. At all. I mean, at all. I should have waited to put the starter on, but that's my own fault. Made my bed, now I gotta lie in it. Excuse my head. Alright, I think I got them all started. To make sure they're running good before I put a ratchet on them. Yep. Okay. Now you can put the ratchet on them. Get them at least snug down. Makes my wrist tired. It's a little slower, but alright. So there's those. Now we can torque these down. Got the torque wrench set to 20 foot-pounds. Didn't get that one very tight. Oop, that one's done. That one's done. That one's done. That one's done. There we go. Got a new oil pan on. Oh, I forgot to show you the clean. I cleaned the inside of it. I didn't get the outside very clean, mostly because I got all the loose dirt, grime, and stuff like that off of it. But I figured there was no reason to look much further. Something else I did off camera is I checked the wear on the on this between the crankshaft and the pit and the rods, and it was less than the .03 that it spec'd out. So that was another sign the engine's pretty good. Let me get this turned back up right, and we will start working on putting it all back together. Probably the only thing I'm going to do while it's still up like this, and this will be in a separate video, is air gapping the clutch. I haven't shown that in a video since I got the 4K video, and so I'll go ahead and do that, and with really good light and everything. So that'll be a separate video that I might just throw out there, not necessarily on a normal release schedule. But I think that's it. We got this engine back together. Now we can start putting the 10s on and get it in the 91.